Thank you, Scott. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for staying after lunch. I know it's been a long morning so far. Hopefully, we will get through this easily, and then we can answer questions, and you can be on your way. I tend to be a little bit more didactic in my approach. So Laura, I was wondering if it's okay if we have a mic runner through the presentation. Because if you have a question, please just raise your hand. I respond well to that sort of didactic, interactive presentation. Before we get started on the living arrangements aspect, I just want to touch base on a couple things, because Ken and Lori both did some amazing content in their talks this morning. And I just wanted to emphasize with Ken's how important it is to have that trust in place. Too often, Lori and I end up having clients who did not do that, especially those that may have some cognitive impairment. And when that happens, it can be very, very difficult to access the resources to be able to pay for care. So Ken, I really, really appreciated that, Ken. And the other was with regards to hospice, is that palliative care can be accessed very early, and Lori can talk more about that, but that ability to access palliative care and do it early enough so you can get the benefits is really helpful, as well as hospice. Somebody asked about end-of-life pre-planning and care around end-of-life. Lori, I'm sure Ken and myself, we all have access to resources with regards to that. So if anybody wants ideas about or resources, we're happy to share those with you. So we're talking today about planning at the end of life, the later life, right? End of life, really, we're seniors at, what is it now, 55? They say we're seniors? I'm a senior. This morning, Scott was kind enough to introduce each of us, and I have all those silly letters after my name. I'm a nurse like Lori, and Lori has specialized in hospice care. My background is in mental health and public health. I did go and do some extra training with regards to dementia, working with people with cognitive impairments. So I'm a certified dementia practitioner. Oops. Let's go back. That's not what I wanted to do. Here it is. A certified dementia practitioner and a trainer, so that I can help the communities that provide support for cognitive impairment with education and to provide improvement to the care that they are giving within the environment that they're in. So that's enough about me. So the national, I'm sure not very many people are familiar with an association called the National Aging in Place Council. It is a national council that I've chosen to belong to, which might seem a bit counterintuitive for somebody who works in senior housing and senior living. But the purpose of it is that they are very good at understanding that we need to age in the environment that is right for us. And that can be very different for each person. So I've been a member for many years, and these 5 pillars, housing, health and wellness, personal finance, and socialization, and transportation. If we can meet these 5 areas are really the 5 areas that we have found need to be successfully met for us to be able to age in the environment that we're in, whatever environment that might be. So you know, if we can meet these in our traditional family home, in our senior living environment, living with our children, living in an ADU, or you know, it can be very diverse. Housing can mean many things. It can be your individual home, like we said. I think I was talking, was it Judy just lives down the road in her own home. We can live in a 55-plus community. Sometimes we'll move from our traditional family home to a 55-plus community. We might move to an independent living, an assisted living, pretty diverse. The big thing with our home is it needs to meet those 5 pillars. We need to look at things like accessibility. Is our home going to meet our needs as we age? Do we have multiple floors? Do we have a full-size bathroom on the bottom floor and a bedroom downstairs if we get to the point where we cannot use the stairs? How easy is it to get in and out? Is there a steep driveway? Those sorts of things are things that we want to think about before we need to do something about it. Being aware of the environment we're in. I have a friend here, David DaCosta, is a realtor and is very familiar with how sometimes we need to change the house we're in. Most of us don't live in the house we did as a child, or when we went to college, when we were newly married, when we raised our children. We might be in the same one, or we might have moved. You know, what sort of modifications are we going to do in our home? Can this home meet our needs now, and can it meet our needs as they change? If I end up in a wheelchair, or if my spouse ends up with cognitive impairment or dementia, is it going to be a safe environment for us? So the idea about this home being a home that is going to be good for us in the long term. So looking at those sorts of things. How wide are the halls? How wide are the doorways? Does the bathroom door open inwards or outwards? My son is a firefighter with Lakeside Fire, and he asks me every time I go to someone's home, convince them to have their bathroom door open outwards. Because he says, everyone falls on the other side of it, and then we can't get in. And he says, I'm tired of going through those little tiny square windows head first, trying to get into the person. He sent me a funny picture of the boots, and all we saw was this little window and the bottoms of his boots as he was going through the window to try to get someone in the bathroom. You know, it was really funny, but at the same time, he says, it takes way longer, it's harder to access, and people don't like it when you break their doors down. In addition to our home being the physical environment of how it's structured, it's also with regards to how we manage our belongings in our home. Dr. Guidry will be well familiar with a home where there are a lot of belongings where we can't get a wheelchair through, or there's rickety, beautiful, antique tables that if you grabbed hold of it when you were falling would not support you and you would end up on the floor. Those sorts of things are things that we need to analyze when we're looking at our home, in addition to the physical structure of our home. With regards to health and wellness, that's one of the, so we're looking through the 5 pillars that I had mentioned with the National Aging in Place Council. And the reason I'm doing this is because these 5 pillars, if we analyze them, help us to then evaluate the home that we live in and whether this home is right for us or if we need to choose a different home. Or if we can modify the home that we're in with things like chair lifts or stair rails or safety, lowering bathroom cabinets, things like that. So when we're looking at health and wellness, we really want to focus on, yes, access to medical care. Can we get to our doctors? Can we get in and out of the home? But in addition, how are we able to meet our own care needs in the environment? I'm going to pick on Judy because we had a nice conversation over lunch, and she was commenting on being able to bring care into the home. That is a wonderful service because then we can do things like assistance with bathing or dressing or mobility, eating, toilet access, cognition, and socialization. Those sorts of things are things that we can provide support in the home or outside the home. But we need to be able to have access to the care that will help with these things. Do we have health conditions like diabetes? What happens when I'm no longer able to give myself my own insulin? Who's going to do it for me? Can my loved one do it? Ideally, yes, but we don't always have that option. That can be very expensive to pay someone to come into the home. A regular home care person is not permitted to give that. You actually have a nurse, you have to have a nurse like Lori or myself to come in and give that injection. Now all of a sudden, you're paying a higher rate for care. So those sorts of things start to become a bigger issue. For personal finance, I put this graph up because I thought it would be helpful. I don't think I've ever gone to meet a client. Actually, this is not true. Rarely do I go meet a client who's excited about moving into senior living, right? It's usually not our goal. But there are some independent living places that are like cruise ships on land, and people are excited to go there, right? It's like active lifestyle with pickleball courts and tennis courts and swimming pools and shuffleboard. So you can move to a place like that. But most of us want to stay in our traditional family home. That's usually our goal. These are, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Genworth. It's a national company. I think it's a financial company. Is that correct? Somebody hopefully will know that. Anyway, every year they come out with the costs for different regions for different types of services. And this was from 2021. It was the most recent one that they had available online. And so I just wanted to touch base on a couple things here because we talked about those personal care items for health and wellness. For us to have caregiving in the home, we're looking here at homemakers or homemaker health aid. I'm not quite sure what the difference between them is. But this is based on 44 hours a week. This is not full-time. If you need nighttime care, weekend care, you're looking at a lot different rates. So, I'm sorry. Oh, you can't read the numbers? Is that you're asking me to speak them? Okay. So homemaker services, this would be like a home care company coming into your home for 44 hours a week. The average is $6,387 a month. Okay, and that's for basically full-time hours, but not weekends, not nights. You add nights and weekends, you're paying overtime, and then it'll likely be double or more of that rate. So that would be if you need care during the day. Maybe you still work and your spouse can't be home alone and you're home at night. Or maybe they're pretty safe during the night and you really need someone there to do meals, help them with bathing and things like that. Adult day programs, this would be about the price a month, $2,058. These are 2021 numbers, please note. Am I speaking too quickly? I do apologize. What was the question? Okay, adult daycare, they're saying, this is Genworth saying for a month, is about averaging $2,058. This is a wonderful option for people that are going to stay home, but maybe it's cognitive impairment and they're going to go for the day to an adult daycare and then come home for nights. Then we have assisted living. This is the average for a private one-bedroom is $5,475, and that's to live in on a monthly basis. And then nursing home is more like the skilled nursing rehab that is most people will go to. Rarely do we live in it long-term permanent, but some people will live in it for different reasons. And you can have shared rooms or private rooms, and that's $9,000. Remember, these are averages from 2021. $9,384 or $12,167. And that's if you're paying private pay. Of course, your Medicare insurance or your health insurance pays for up to 100 days, I believe, in a year, or a portion thereof, because the amount it pays for changes over time as the time progresses. And I put this up here because when we're talking about personal finances, it's when we plan for retirement, we're usually looking at being able to manage our home, being able to afford our car, being able to live, but we don't usually include these sorts of costs in our estimate for retirement. Some people have long-term care insurance. In fact, I'm really curious. Can anyone raise their hand if they have long-term care insurance? Oh, I am impressed with you. I am really impressed. I gotta tell you, because that's not as common on the general as what I'm seeing in this room. That is amazing. If you have long-term care insurance, because now you can't even buy a new policy. It has to be a rider on a life insurance because they don't even sell it as a regular policy anymore. So that's fabulous because long-term care insurance will pay for these. when or if you have the time that you need it. So with personal finance, we need to be able to, look at, can we pay for the home care? They can come in and help you wherever you live. They can help you in your traditional family home, independent living, 55 plus. We need to be prepared for paying for home modifications, for transportation, for social interactions. Usually, when a client comes to me, one of the first things I ask is to please bring their financial advisor in so that we know what is sustainable over the long term. Ken was talking about preparing so that you can be preparing for spending over the long term, and I think you were talking about having certain types of investments that provide an income. But that ability to know that what you can afford and what is sustainable so that we don't run out of funds and so we can be wise about the use of our funds. Recently, we had this terrible epidemic that rocked our world, and social engagement was one of the areas that suffered the most. There's been a lot of articles, a lot of research, a lot of discussion about social isolation and the impact that that's been having on everybody, but especially our elder population. It is one of the primary factors for clients with regards that are starting to experience symptoms of cognitive impairment. It's kind of one of those pillars that has been identified as helping to slow the progression of cognitive impairment and dementia. It is vital to our quality of life. I can't remember whom I was speaking with earlier. We were talking about quality versus quantity, and that it seems like our medical system is so geared at giving us lots of quantity, but it forgets about the quality, and that we need to be able to live our life and have a purpose, have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And social interaction is one of those things that helps with that. Often, isolation becomes a bigger factor as we age because we're not driving anymore. Maybe we're having a lot of pain and going out becomes difficult, or we get very tired and the idea of going out and doing a big activity is exhausting. Sometimes we have physical limitations with maybe some incontinence that we're embarrassed to go out because we're afraid that something might happen while we're out, or we're afraid of falling. There's lots of reasons why social engagement becomes a factor, something that is not met as we age. Thankfully, faith and having your church community is one of the big things that can help with that. So the fact that you have this here is a wonderful gift. I think it's one of the gifts that God has given us by our congregations, is that we can build those relationships and trust somebody and have that close relationship. But not everybody has that. And so sometimes we have people that are sadly very isolated and their mental health suffers as a result, and they don't know what their purpose is. The last pillar that I had on that list was transportation, which really seems like such a minor point. That for it to be one of the 5 pillars to successful aging, kind of like, why? And I think it's vital because our home is supposed to be a place where we experience our freedom, where we can enjoy people, where we can go out and do the things that we want to do. But what happens is if we don't have access, if we don't have transportation, then that starts to become limited. I was talking to my parents last night, and my father was downstairs on Zoom because he's one of the elders in our church, and he couldn't go to the meeting because his night vision is now such that he can't drive at night. Now, thankfully, they have gone and said, okay, if you can't come, usually they will actually come to my parents' home and do it there so my dad can participate. But they couldn't last night, but they had brought Zoom in so that he could still participate. So they're very good about including him. But if he didn't have that, he wouldn't have had any interaction. And of course, Zoom is still not as good as being face-to-face together like we are today. So driving, being able to, a lot of people either stop driving out of choice or they stop driving out of necessity. And just to be clear, my dad still drives, just not at night. So, but it's still, it's becoming a limiting factor for their life, especially in northern Canada where it's getting dark right now at 3:30 in the afternoon and it's not light until 8:30 in the morning, right? So he only can go out between those hours. In the summertime, he can go out at 3 in the morning and he can be out till midnight, but you know, it becomes a little bit difficult in the middle of winter. So driving, and then of course the safety of transportation. If your loved one, if you're starting to see a lot of dings and dents and scratches and fender benders, it may be an indication that the driving ability is becoming somewhat more limited. I recently had a client where his mom was driving and he called me and he says she had an accident and she went to the hospital and evidently she had had a stroke that they didn't know about where she had lost half the vision in both eyes. So she couldn't see anything out of the right side of both eyes. All she got, so she had monocular vision out of both eyes. So no wonder she didn't know anything was on her right-hand side. And that's why she had the accident. So it's not always because we did something wrong. Sometimes things just happen and we don't know that they happened. She didn't have any other symptoms of a stroke, so there was no way to know that it had happened. And she didn't notice the difference. So if we don't have transportation, then we end up isolated, and the freedom of our home can become something that feels like a prison. We can feel like our home is not easily accessible for us. But there's things we can do about that for living at home. You know, I have clients where they set up an account for their mom with GoGo Grandparent, which is similar to Uber, but you only have to be able to make a phone call. You don't have to be able to use a smartphone. And she goes wherever she wants. She just phones them. They pick her up where she is. They take her where she wants to go. So there are things we can do to help improve that accessibility. So just because we don't have aren't driving anymore doesn't mean our own traditional family home won't work, but it's just another factor that we have to consider. So when we look at these 5 factors, if we cannot meet them in our own home the way things are now, we either bring in resources, improve the accessibility and the use of our home, or we may have to move to another location. As I said, most of us don't want to move to another location. This is our home. Home is supposed to be the place that meets our needs. If our home isn't meeting our needs, just like we don't live in the home we did as a child or when we went to college or when we raised our children, or we might, because I know some of you likely have been here a very long time in the same home, I think there's something when we retire, we think that we never move again, right? We're done. We don't have to move anymore, we're done. But just like we had to change through our life to meet our needs, sometimes that happens in later life as well. Not always, but sometimes. And when that happens, it's important for us to be realistic and to think ahead. All day we've been talking about preparing ahead, being aware beforehand so that we can prepare ourselves and be aware of what our options are, rather than being in a point of crisis where now we have to do something immediately. The hardest thing is when I receive that phone call from the emergency department that says, my dad's went to the emergency, he's being discharged and he can't go home, and we've got 4 hours. That is very difficult, and you have limited options. So being prepared ahead of time is vital. So what we want to do when we're doing that preparation is identifying our own needs. Just like we went through those 5 pillars for aging in place, we really need to do that when we're looking at any other options of where we're going to live. And I apologize for moving. I tend to be restless, so please excuse me. And if anyone has any questions, just raise your hand. So what are your goals when we're looking at where we're going to move to? What's important to you? You know, what are your financial resources? What are your social goals? If this is your church, you're not going to want to move to a place in Santee We're going to want to provide an environment where you can still access your community, where we can still help you with that social aspect and the spiritual aspect of having your needs met. What care needs do you have? You know, there's some beautiful communities here in La Jolla, but not all of them can meet all needs. Is that me making that clicking sound? It's my earring. I apologize. I'm going to take my earring out, and I'm so sorry. I just noticed it. I hope that hasn't bothered you too much all the way through this. So what are your care needs? And do you have, say, chronic health conditions? Those chronic health conditions, we can often forecast a little bit. We were just talking about a condition called post-polio syndrome at lunchtime. You know, if you had polio as a child, there's a disease called post-polio syndrome where the illness comes back in later life. Dr. Guidry knows what I'm talking about. I didn't even know it existed till a few years ago. But if you have that, you know, there's certain things that we have an idea of what may be coming. We only have an idea. Everyone's an individual, but it gives us an opportunity to forecast a little bit. You know, if you have chronic conditions like COPD or congestive heart failure, MS, you know, people live very successful, beautiful lives with those illnesses, but we need to manage the care that they're being provided. So what are the care needs? And what does home mean to you? When you think of home, what does it mean to you? Is it the place? Is it the people? Is it the comfort? Those are things that we want to think about when you're starting to look at a senior living community, because who you are and what home means to you helps you to identify what type of environment is right for you. When I am working with a client, one of the things that we're trying to do is to help you to identify the environment that will fit your goals. If staying home for now is what we need to do, then we help you with the resources to do that. And it may be that you're going to stay there right to the end of life and bring hospice in and bring home care in. It may be that you'll do that for a while and then you'll move to a different one. Depending on who you are, each of those solutions is going to be individual. It's going to be the one that works for you, and your need might be different than yours and different from yours. And what's important when we're working with somebody is that we help them to find the place that fits that need. I have this up here because what home is can be so many different things. For some people, there it is. For some people, they end up living in a rehab skilled nursing for a long time for many reasons. Maybe they're on Medi-Cal and they don't have the financial resources to be able to stay in a traditional family home or to live in a different environment. So what I did, actually I didn't do it, my husband built it for me because I have no skills. But if you move to the right, the level of care goes up. If you go upwards, the cost goes up. Now that's the overall cost. It doesn't mean you're going to private pay it, because a hospital or your skilled nursing will be either paid all or in portion by your insurance. But it gives you an idea. You have in-home care that we looked at, which was starting at 44 hours was around $5,000 or $6,000 a month. The more you need, the more the price goes up. And then I will be specifically addressing those items in green. They tend to be the ones that I work with the most. I do refer, we have partners in each of these other areas that are expert. For example, I work very closely with Lori with regards to hospice care. Hospice of the North Coast, by the way, in my opinion, is the top in the county. Their palliative care program is second to none in this county. I know they don't serve down here, but they do serve some of UTC, and it's excellent. You can't read the words. Okay, I am so sorry. Let me see if I can make this any bigger. Let me see. Does that work? Let me see if I can make it so you can still see it, but you still read it. Is that legible? Okay, thank you. I'm glad I have a touch screen because I wouldn't know what to do otherwise. So we're going to touch base on the ones in the green. I just briefly want to talk about these ones in the beige because I don't work as intimately with them, but I can certainly tell you which ones are excellent and which ones you may want to reconsider. A lot of my clients call me when their loved one is either in the hospital or in skilled nursing. Often they're in the hospital and they're being sent to skilled nursing, and they call me and say, which skilled nursing should I go to? My first answer is always, which ones does your insurance cover? Because that matters. And then once you have that list, then call me back and we'll select the top 3 for you to look and see if they have availability for your loved one to go to. Whoops. In-home care. Oops, I did it again. Let me see if I can do like this. Is that okay? So in-home senior care, there are some excellent home care companies. There are others that don't train their caregivers. I've had people call me and say, I got a home care company, and the caregiver doesn't even know how to help my mom from the bed into the wheelchair. To me, that's not an appropriate home care company. Ongoing education. Lori and I were talking about being, at heart, we're educators. We might be nurses, but to us, it's about people knowing what they need to know so that they can look after their own personal care and be responsible for it. Respite care. Lori talked about respite care with regards to hospice. There is also the option for respite care with regards to sometimes you may choose to have your loved one at home long-term and you have a caregiver, but maybe you're going away to a wedding or you need a vacation. We can also do respite care that is private pay in an assisted living or a boarding care. Now, Lori mentioned, and I'm going to agree with Lori, if I have a client who's on hospice and the family cannot manage their loved one at home any longer and they want them to move into a senior living option, I don't recommend an assisted living, one of the large ones, because their ability to provide the type of care that we need is limited by the size of their environment and other factors. And then we have adult day programs we already spoke to, so I think that's it. And then we'll touch on the ones in green because those are ones that most people, when they think of assisted living, they're thinking of some variant of those that are in green up there. One thing I wanted, before we go further though, is I hear a lot of people use the term nursing home. It's an old term that was used a lot back in the 60s and 70s and 80s. And generally, when people are thinking of nursing home, what they're thinking about is a rehab skilled nursing. The place where, sadly, there's not a lot of activity, it's crowded, usually doesn't smell very nice, not very good lighting, not a lot of activities, not very friendly, doesn't feel very loving. I've worked in those places as a nurse, and it is tough. I got to tell you, it is a hard job because you're given 20 or 30 patients, you're running all day, you have no time for relationships. I call it transactional nursing. There is nothing about a personal relationship in that, which is likely why we choose to leave that environment and work in a different type of nursing. Anyway, that's usually what people are thinking of when they're talking about skilled nursing. And I just realized I'm talking too much and we got to get moving or we're not going to finish. Independent living is the first step of senior living. And really independent living is more like those, what I was talking about, cruise ships on land, right? It's not about personal care. It's often about quality of life and socialization. It's about not having to cook for yourself, not having to do your housekeeping, not having to do your laundry. You don't have to drive if you don't want to. All the activities are there. They arrange all these beautiful excursions. In fact, there's one senior living community in San Diego County. If you live there, they have those senior living communities across the country, and you can go to those other ones, and you can just go on a trip to there and stay in that one, and they'll help you. So, I mean, it's fabulous, right? So you get to travel as well. So they offer a wide range of services, but they're all external to our physical body, right? They're looking at things like housekeeping, planned outings. There's usually things like salons and manicurists and massage people. You pay extra for anything that's personal care. They can be a standalone building, or they can be integrated in with other forms of senior living as well, such as assisted living or memory care. Many of these, because they don't offer personal care, will have an in-house home care company that can offer a variation of that home care service we were talking about. Important to remember that home care typically is non-skilled, unskilled nursing. They are not nurses. You can have some home care companies that offer skilled nursing as well. Here's a couple examples. Somebody said they live in UTC. Atria La Jolla is just on Noble, up there in UTC, across from where the V is. And and this is kind of I just put these up just as a couple examples. One of the things when I'm working with these communities is that I'm constantly going in and evaluating them, because just because something was good 5 years ago doesn't mean it's good now. Or it was bad 5 years ago and it might be great now, right? And Independent's a little bit different. They are not licensed by the state. So that means that they're providing a service without supervision by regulation. And beyond, of course, the housing regulations of building, which would be building codes and things like that. Another example is Arcadia Place, which is up in Vista. And I put this one in because everyone thinks everything is so terribly expensive, and it is. But I have people that move into this community for under $3,000 a month, and that includes all those things we talked about: housekeeping, laundry, meals, transportation. So there are options out there that are not horrifically expensive. Of course, it depends on the size. That one would be a studio that I was referring to. But for someone who's lower income, it's nice to know that there's some options out there. There are not very many of them, though, I will tell you that. And I'm not even going to claim it's the best in the county, but I'll tell you that it's clean, and it's well maintained, and the food is nutritious. So assisted living is all those things that independent living is, with the addition of the option to provide care. They can help with things like medication management, care, helping people who have maybe mobility needs. Maybe they need shower assistance. They're afraid of falling if they get in the shower. They might need assistance to the dining room. They might be wheelchair bound and can't get in and out of bed on their own. Those sorts of things, different assisted livings offer in different ways. So there are some assisted livings that won't do anything for any assistance that requires a full lift of a person. There are others that will go all the way to using a Hoyer lift or a two-person lift. A Hoyer is a machine that almost has like a sling where we can lift somebody with one person, move them, and put them into their chair. They're fabulous, but it takes special training. There's a lot of need for good supervision of that, and some places just choose not to provide that service because of the liability and the risks involved. Or two-person lifts because they don't want the risk of staff injuries, etc. So assisted living provides all those external things as well as things related to the body. They do not do skilled nursing. So they're not doing, generally, injections, IVs, tube feedings, working with the medical type of things. There are exceptions. You know, there are some skilled nursings that have nurses 24 hours a day. There are some that will do insulin management. A lot of them won't. So that's part of my responsibility when I'm working with a client, of course, and going back to that needs assessment and who are you and what works for you. A couple examples for assisted living include, I'm sure you guys know Casa de Mañana. It's right down the road here. I love that community. It does not have a memory care. So if anyone has any cognitive, even if they're beginning to have cognitive impairment, I don't recommend it. Because why would we move somebody, especially if they're going to have cognitive impairment, into an environment they can't stay in, and then we have to move again, right? So that's part of that whole understanding who they are. But Casa de Mañana is beautiful. I've had some clients move in there that are very happy. I've had people move in there who had moved in there and then called me because it wasn't the right fit for them. Another example is this beautiful new community in Carmel Valley, which is off Del Mar Heights Road. It's lovely. It's right behind the Catholic Church there. A little bit higher end, quite costly, has independent living and assisted living and memory care all on the same campus. And it's quite lovely, but it's very costly. Right now, by the way, if anyone's thinking of moving there, I'm referring people who are independent right now, but I'm holding off on the assisted and memory care part until they can get their staffing up, because they only opened in November. I don't expect a community that just opened to be right up to snuff with regards to all those things, right? So it takes some time. But for right now, I'm referring to them for independent when it's appropriate. And by the way, when I say referring, it means that when I have that conversation with somebody and we narrow down what they're looking for, usually I will recommend, between 4 and 6, maybe 4 and 8 options that look like they will meet their needs. And I'll talk about that, but that would be the type of place that I might recommend, depending on who they are. Lori referred a bit to boarding cares or residential care home. I actually have myself kind of defined in my own head a difference between residential care and boarding care, because there's a big difference within this group. There are almost 700 in the county of San Diego. It's a massive industry. Some of them are very good, and some of them are less than exceptional. I have a personal policy. I never refer or recommend a place that I haven't been to myself. And on top of that, I have a policy where I don't call them the first time I'm coming, because I want to know what it's really like when they're not expecting me. Now, I don't expect that they're going to drop everything and give me a tour, but I do expect that when I knock on that door, they're going to open the door, they're going to speak to me, and I'm going to have an opportunity to do that visual scan. And Lori and Dr. G and others of you who've been in senior living know that first scan tells you a lot. And so I will do that, and then I'll ask for the contact information for the owner and arrange to come back for a tour. And it's my way of being able to say, do I even want to go back for that tour? And I'll tell you, there's an owner who owns 3. 2 of them are in San Marcos and 1 is in La Jolla, where I have never gone back after my first introduction to it. And I just said, as long as he's the owner, I will not go to those communities. And I don't care how little money someone has, I'll recommend they stay in a skilled nursing before they go to those communities. So it's important. This is one of the reasons why it's so important that you have someone that's going to help you when it comes to looking for at what your options are. Because he has one in La Jolla. Who would think? Right? Who would think that something that sketchy, when we think that we have beautiful places here, but you can still have people that just don't do good care. So boarding cares, they can do all the care that an assisted living can. They provide the things an independent living does. What they don't tend to provide is the level of amenities and social activities. Generally, when I'm working with someone for a boarding care, there's somebody whose needs are much higher, who maybe is less engaged, maybe their physical needs are so high that they can't get around within a larger environment, and we want a small environment where we can have eyes on very easily, so that we can find a place maybe that has the bedrooms around the outside, so that anybody who's in the main area, the moment I turn my head, I can see all the rooms, for example, right? So that we don't have to be in their room every 2 hours like they would in a beautiful place like Casa de Mañana. We can see them every 15 minutes. The moment there's a sound, we can turn our head and look. So there's a lot of benefits to a boarding care. In addition, and this one, by the way, is just on, what's the hill that goes over? It's a bit south of here in South La Jolla. It goes up and over, and there's the park at the top. Mount Soledad? So it's right off Mount Soledad Road. Yes. Yes, he does. He owns 3 up there. I just gave one example. But yes, they own 3. But, they're not all created equal. Some of them have awake night staff, some don't. So it gets pretty diverse as to what they can do. Some of them are owned by nurses. I have one nurse that owns, she and her mom, they're both nurses, they own 8 of them in North County. And they will get a waiver for all those things we were talking about, feeding tubes, IVs, injections. They can look after those in those homes, and then our loved ones don't have to live in a skilled nursing for the rest of their life. And they get really good care because the nurses are supervising the care continually. They go in and do all the injections and that sort of thing. And here's another example. I put these two up because there's about $3,000 a month difference in price. Quality is just the same. What you're paying for is location. So that makes a big difference. You know, if somebody doesn't want to spend $9,000, they'd rather spend $6,000. They move from Mount Soledad to really Vista Carlsbad line, and you're paying $3,000 a month less. Memory care is all the things assisted living is, but provides a secure environment. I gotta make sure. How much time do I have, Laura? Yeah. Okay, and we're moving along pretty quick. Yes. So the board and care is licensed by the state the same way an assisted living is. So the state comes at least once a year to check on them. They do unannounced spot checks. So they have the same regulations and the same requirements. Lori was talking about having her RCFE certification. That RCFE licensing applies to both board and cares and assisted living and memory care. So yes, they are. Yeah, supervised by social services. At the end of my presentation, I'm actually going to reference their website because one of the things we do before we even go into one of those places is to look at what the state says about them. Because if the state's received 20 complaints of neglect and abuse, I'll still go look, but it gives me a heads up of what I need to look for. And if those complaints were 10 years ago and there's made nothing since, well, that tells me something too, right? So they tend to have, memory care tends to have smaller rooms. There's a secure, safe environment for somebody who has cognitive impairment or some form of dementia. Often, so people who have dementia have lots of different needs. Sometimes, Lori had mentioned, frontal temporal lobe or Lewy body. Sometimes we have some forms of dementia where there's behaviors that the person starts to exhibit as a result of their disease, where we have to be able to manage those in more of an acute care setting before they can live in a memory care. A memory care doesn't really know can't deal well or keeps their residents safe if one resident is beating another, right? So we have to deal with those things. And sadly, those are sometimes aspects of the disease that occur. They tend to be smaller rooms. They have a secure outside area so they can walk around outside. Here's one in Encinitas. Silverado has a great reputation as being one of the good great memory care. They have great programs. They're very expensive. Most people can't afford $11,000 or $12,000 a month, which is about what they're costing right now. But they're good at managing people who have behaviors that are difficult to manage. They still provide a secure environment. They can meet those personal care things we were talking about. Vista Gardens is more like $6,000 a month up in Vista. Beautiful community, able to manage a lot of the care needs someone has, but they're not good at managing people with aggressive behaviors. And that's, again, part of my role, right, is to say, what type of dementia does your loved one have? What sorts of behaviors do we have? What are their care needs? And then let's identify, even if we need a memory care, we might not need one. I get this call all the time from my mom was just diagnosed with dementia, I need a memory care. And I start to feel out where mom's at, and I'm like, your mom likely would do fine in an assisted living with some medication management for now. And then when she needs memory care, we can look at that. So being able to help identify what is the right thing for them. I touched on skilled nursing. Like I said, it's a different type of care. It's covered by all the other ones. The assisted living, the independent living, the memory care, and the boarding care are generally private pay. They can be covered by your long-term care insurance. These are generally covered by your Medicare insurance or your supplemental. If you're there over 100 days, basically the cost goes up. Yes, dear? yes, Lori was reminding me that if it's long-term placement, what they call custodial care, meaning that you can't care for them at home, but they don't really have a skilled need for skilled nurses, then it's custodial care, and that's not covered by your health insurance. If someone's on Medi-Cal, then Medi-Cal may pay for that, depending on what your share of cost is from under Medi-Cal. Generally, if I have clients who are living in here under custodial care on Medi-Cal, I'm actually recommending they apply for a different program under the state to be able to pay for them to live in a board and care or a memory care or an assisted living. So continuing care retirement community, you may have remembered back to that graph, it was a green bar that went all the way across the top. And that's because they generally incorporate all or a portion of all of those options. They do not include a hospital. They may or may not include some of the others. CCRC includes a skilled nursing. But one of the things I encourage people to think about when they're looking at this and they think, oh, it has a skilled nursing and rehab, it's right on the same site, is for you to remember that that's paid for you by your health insurance. And your health insurance might not pay for that skilled nursing, for one thing. They might pay for these ones over here. Or that skilled nursing may not have availability when you need it. Or maybe you move there, you think you're going to go to that skilled nursing, and then your loved one has issues or behaviors that they say, well, we don't work with that. And then you got to go somewhere else anyway. So usually my recommendation is that you don't go to a community because of a skilled nursing. It may be there or it may not. We select it based on other needs. La Costa Glen, a lot of you will be familiar with them. They're up in Carlsbad. Beautiful place. Really, a CCRC, continuing care retirement community, is fabulous for the young, active senior to move into who wants to enjoy all those extra amenities. But often I find that they don't pay as much attention to the assisted living and the memory care as they do to the independent part of it. And if we're going to choose a CCRC, you really want to ask, is it a type A, a type B, or a type C? And people don't even know there's a difference. But the difference is, if you're in a type A like La Costa Glen, your prices are fixed, and you don't have that increasing price range. But if you're in a type B or a type C, your costs, as you change levels of care, will still go up. And people don't realize that they should be checking on that. They're like, oh, my costs are fixed. I included Torrey Pines because everyone sees these and thinks it's a great big buy-in, right? $700,000, $1.2 million buy-in to be able to move into the community. But not all of them are buy-in. Some of them are month to month. 30-day notice to move out, but this is not one that has all those fancy amenities. They have a skilled nursing, they have assisted living, they have memory care. They say they have independent living, but really, you can move in independent, but they don't have all the extra amenities that you would in a regular CCRC. So when you're working with somebody who does something like I do, the industry of a senior advisor is not regulated by the state. And I think that if I wasn't a nurse and a dementia practitioner, there is no accountability that I have beyond a business person and having my liability insurance that would hold me accountable to my clients. One of the things, there are lots of really good senior advisors out there, but I highly recommend, if you're going to work with one, that you would have somebody who's chosen to belong to it's a self-regulating body called the National Placement and Referral Alliance, and we hold each other, at least it's something, right? We hold each other accountable to good behavior, to a code of conduct, to good ethics, to right of choice. Has anyone here heard of, there's an online company called A Place for Mom? Okay. And they have their role, so please don't get this as me dissing them. They have their role and they do some things very well. They're good at showing you what's out there. What they're not good at is if you give them your name and your email address, they will send it to every single community. And then if you ever choose to work with somebody else like me, they'll say, I'm sorry, the community cannot work with us because you've gone and given your number to them. So the online challenges are pretty significant because they will even Shanghai people's websites, and then you end up with the challenge of that. However, they are good if you know that you are going to be able to do all your own research, go and do the check for yourself, review the communities, and you're willing to accept the fact that they're going to give your information out to everybody and they're all going to call you. So, you know, if they give your information out to 50 communities, you're going to receive calls from every single one of those locations. So, but the reason I bring that up is because a good senior advisor is going to take the time to know who you are. They're not going to charge you anything because we're paid out of the marketing dollars from the community. So the community has signed an agreement with us that they won't charge you more if you work with one of us because they have marketing funds that are allocated. So a good senior advisor will provide you the consultation, help you with these things, provide the housing. I often, because driving's an issue, I often end up picking people up. We go on the tours together, help eliminate so you don't have to go tour 15, 20 places. Hopefully we tour 3 or 4. I think, Laura, you guys toured a few more than that. But usually we recommend not touring too many. That we can, if we do a good job, we can really narrow it down. I can send you 4 or 6, maybe 6 options by email. We then talk about them, narrow it down some more, tour. I toured the other day with a lady. We toured 2 places, and she chose one of them because we had narrowed it down well enough that when we went there, she's like, yes, this is it. So there's my contact information. I was not bright enough to bring business cards or anything like that. Our goal is to help with you to find the resources you need to live your best life with quality and a purpose and a reason to get out of bed in the morning. Whether we choose to age in place at home and are able to make that work, we'll help you with the resources and the services that you need to come into that, or we can help you to identify the senior living environment that is right for you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.